Jai Mata. Charanam Sharanam Ramambige. Charanam Sharanam Trayambage. The ornament of a woman who is the queen of home is chastity, which is the hallmark of wifely devotion. Chastity is enshrined in a twofold virtue: steadfastness to wisdom and devotion to dharma. The Pativrata, the devoted wife, is a remarkable combination of wisdom, devotion, and yoga. She is the paragon of virtues. She represents both self mastery and self resignation. Being established in the knowledge of self, her dedication of life at the altar of Dharma is no slavery but loud proclamation of the freedom of self. Puranas are replete with glorious achievements of Padivratas. The Pativrata has commanded the forces of nature. She has humbled the gods. She has stopped the course of the sun. She has subdued even destiny. Such is the glory of a Pativrata that her presence and purity can bring about the moral regeneration of the entire nation. The Pativrata is born and not made. For her, there is no need of any instruction in Dharma, for Dharma is already in her blood, in her heart, and in her consciousness. She is a blazing fire of purity. He who casts a look with evil intention on her invites his own destruction. Ravana was second to none in penance and in steadfastness to worship. He used to give oblations to sun god even before dawn in the 8 quarters. He was a great devotee of Lord Shiva and exercised his authority even in the celestial worlds. But in spite of all these virtues and powers, his evil desire to possess another's wife brought about his ultimate ruin. Ancient womanhood of Bharat was a combination of heroic spirit, Kshatravirya, Brahmic splendor, Brahma Tejas, and Dharmic force, Dharma Shakti. Assimilate this radiant ideal in your life and shine as the pride of your country. Draupadi's motherly heart pardoned even the cruel hearted Ashwathama who committed the most heinous sin of murdering all her children. Where is a mother who can show this depth of divine fortitude and the strength to bear the greatest sorrow? If there is one such heroic soul in the country, the mankind will see the tremendous spiritual force manifested on earth. Anasuya, through the power of her chastity, converted even cosmic gods into babies. Savitri set aside the decree of death and saved her husband by the power of her wifely dharma. Sita Devi lived in the fire of sacrifice and silent penance to exalt her loyalty to Rama. At the altar of devotion to Dharma, the Rajput heroine Padmini sacrificed her life by plunging into the fire pit. Death is 1,000 times preferable to a shameful existence in adharma. This was the eternal message of that courageous soul. Children, these are some of the immortal characters whom the noble Grihasthashram presented to the world. What is required now for you, householders, is adherence to dharma and practice of virtuous conduct. He whose consciousness is established in truth can never deviate from the path of dharma. All these actions will be righteous. To profess devotion and knowledge by tongue and to practice evil in conduct, is this not hypocrisy? life deviated from Dharma in an avenue to destruction and disgrace. It is continuing death. God is Dharma Swarupam itself. To seek Him without any respect for Dharma and devotion to truthfulness is a vain pursuit. Provoked by passion, Urvashi in the celestial world approached Arjuna for the fulfillment of her evil desire. But that valiant soul Arjuna prostrated before Urvashi, addressing her as mother. Possess that devotion to Dharma, my children, which exalted Arjuna in the eyes of even the celestial beings. Is not this heroic blood still flowing through your veins, O householders? The blood which is pure and holy, the blood which proclaims the glory of Dharma, the blood which is the sacred symbol of soul force, the symbol of heroism and perfection. It is not the intellectual knowledge of Vedantic truths acquired through the study of books that glorifies you in the world. You householders should become established in Brahmanishta, Karmanishta, and Dharmanishta. Then only can you demonstrate the glory of spirituality, the glory of your devotion, and the glory of your silent wisdom. The ascetics are intent upon saving their souls. Personal emancipation is their goal. You should share that bliss of liberation with your fellow beings. When you grow in wisdom, purity, self-abnegation, and love, the souls around you will also be elevated. This is the glory of spirituality in Grihasthashram. When you are prepared to sacrifice even the prospect of your deliverance for the sake of humanity, that very moment your life of samsaric bondage will come to an end. You will be liberated, for self-extinction is liberation. The glory of Buddha's nirvana consists in the fact that he brought about perfect self-effacement through his love and compassion for humanity. The subjugated senses, the sublimated mind, the enlightened consciousness, and the chastened heart are the instruments with which the householder performs the worship of the Supreme. His whole life is a yajna, a sacred sacrifice of the most exalted order. The Absolute cannot become truly an object of worship, for the Absolute is the secondless reality. The instruments of perception, like the senses, the mind, the intellect, and the ego, cannot apprehend the Supreme, for they are inert, being modifications of nature. The merger of the mind in the self alone is the way to gain the direct vision of the Supreme. This is what you should achieve in your homes through your tapasya of self-denial and yoga of self-surrender. The worship before the dawn of self-knowledge is indirect. The worship after the dawn of knowledge is the true and direct communion. That will be a worship of the self by the self and for the self. This is the exalted worship which you should offer in your consecrated temple, the home. That alone is true worship, where the worshipper becomes one with the worshipped. That alone is true service, where the distinction of the master and the servant is transcended in the realization of the unity consciousness. Through discipline of devotion and discrimination, purify your mind and ego. The purification of intellect means its liberation from the clutches of egoism. This is achieved by establishing your intellect in the truth imparted by the Guru that you are not a Jiva but the Supreme Brahman itself. The purification of the mind is its freedom from the sixfold passion. This is achieved through restraint of senses, dispassion, devotion, and cultivation of sattvic virtues. The purification of the ego is its detachment from the three gunas. Liberated from the gunas, the ego shines forth in the effulgence of Supreme Brahman. This is true liberation. When the mind is liberated from attachment to the senses, the intellect from the ego, and the ego itself from the three gunas, what remains is the pure Atman. To abide in the pure Atman is liberation. This is also the supreme solitude for the wise. It is the ignorant who think that dwelling in physical isolation is solitude. To transcend the illusion of multiplicity and to remain identified with the secondless Brahman is the solitude which you, householders, should seek and secure. The perfected householder always lives in this state of supreme solitude, ever identified with the ocean of peace and bliss. Though he is busily engaged in the work of the world, he is inwardly inactive in the silence of his self. His senses, mind, and intellect partake of the purity of self. When you realize the self, you will know that the terms wife, husband, father, mother, son, servant, guest, etc. are mere conventional ones. The reality is undivided consciousness. Knowing that Supreme Brahman alone exists and that you are not separate from it, live the life of ecstatic communion in your homes. Have no attachment to anyone, to anything, to any place, and to any condition. This is the freedom of renunciation which you should enjoy in your life. The householder can possess things, but he should not have the sense of possession. Then alone he is a man of renunciation, Tyagi. Feel inwardly that everything belongs to God. You have no right even over your own body. Then what to speak of other things? Hand over your wealth, your wife and children, your responsibilities and burdens, and your own self to God, who is the sole owner, and then you will feel the thrill of a carefree existence like that of a child, even in the midst of heavy worldly responsibilities and duties. Dedicate everything and yourselves to Supreme Being. But do not sit lazy, taking refuge in the theory that everything is willed and done by God only. God's plan is to work through your instrumentalities. Knowing this, be up and doing. You can shift your responsibility to God and at the same time feel and discharge your individual responsibilities. There is no contradiction in it. This is conscious surrender to God. This is remaining as a conscious tool in the hands of God. Be virtuous, be conscious of your duties, but aspire to reach that divine state of being which transcends even virtue and duty consciousness. When truth is realized, you transcend everything. Then life becomes spontaneous. Actions flow with the dazzling purity of dharma. You go beyond the realm of error and sin. The spontaneity of action is attained only in supreme enlightenment. The Grihastha, attaining this perfection, sees no difference between the infinite and the finite, between God and His creation, between the unmanifested absolute, and the manifested word. With this true vision, this supreme wisdom of the self, the perfected householder finds no need to renounce the world, for the world apart from the self has no existence at all. How can he renounce a thing which does not exist? The householder sage, whose vision of truth is perfect, is not afraid of actions and their bondage, for he knows himself as the non doer. He does not shun the worldly ties, for he sees none other than himself in the world. In sound and silence alike, in activity and quiescence alike, the perfected being senses the divine omnipresence. Every form that he sees is his own form, the form of the formless one. Therefore, he has no attachment to any particular form. Enthroned in supreme perfection, the Grihastha remains as the cosmic man, with the whole universe constituting his body. He lives as the very life of all. He is the light and love that encompass the world. He is the non-doer as well as the all-doer. He is the non-enjoyer as well as the all-enjoyer. He is the transcendent Brahman as also the immanent soul. He, the exalted God-knower, is the father and the mother of all as also the child of all. He is the master of all and also the servant of all. Yet he is above all. His world is Shruti. His silence is peace. His gaze is concentration. His movement is power. This is the supreme status of a perfect Grihastha's personality, which you should aspire to achieve. Sannyasa, the principle of integral renunciation, is the cornerstone of Grihasthashram too. He who has renounced the ego self and has become one with the Absolute is the true sannyasi. He who associates himself with the passions born of nature, though outwardly a sannyasi, is inwardly a householder, for he has already been wedded to the most unruly woman, the Prakriti. Charanam Sharanam Ramambige, Charanam Sharanam Trayambage. Jai Mata.